Liza Lawrence with episode 30, Taste and See. Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence, a wife, mother, teacher, and miracle lover. If you're new to this podcast, this is what we do here. Each week on Miracle Monday, we celebrate awe-inspiring true stories from regular people like you and me. People who have experienced something surprising and wonderful that could be considered the work of a divine source. My desire is to help us recognize God's hand and His love in our lives, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen. Thanks for listening to the show. Now let's celebrate wonders and miracles together. In Psalm chapter 38, verse 8, "O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in Him." In today's episode, we get to hear two different stories of women who gain a new understanding of the power of prayer. These stories highlight God's miraculous power to heal and His tender mercies in the face of death. But the biggest takeaway for me that these stories illustrate is when we have an experience where we can taste and see God's love, it's always life-changing. Thanks for joining me in the movement that miracles still happen. I'm really excited for you to hear these stories. But first, I wanted to give a shout out to the fan of the week. This is from Sarah Westergaard. She says, "I love listening to this podcast and reflecting on God's hand in my own life. Thanks, Liza, for compiling these amazing stories and sharing them with us." Thanks, Sarah, for that review. And I would love your support by writing a review on iTunes and sharing this with your friends and family. It means a lot to me, and I really do appreciate that support. All right, well, let's jump right into this episode. We're first going to hear from Susie and then from Jasmine. So I'm here with Susie today from South Dakota, and she's going to share a miracle story that happened 12 years ago with her father and a healing that she participated in with her father. So Susie, thank you so much for being willing to share your story and tell us what happened.
Okay, well, thank you, Liza. I appreciate the opportunity. I need to start a little bit with the background here. My father, although he was not practicing, was from the Jewish heritage. And my mom was Episcopalian, which is what my sisters and I were raised. And even though we went to church, I really didn't know Christ in a personal way. That isn't until I started dating in high school a young man who turned out to be my husband of 42 years.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and I could see that there was something very different about him and his friends. I didn't exactly know what it was at the time, but I just knew I wanted it. And it didn't take long to realize that his beliefs and his life was deeply rooted in the truth of Jesus Christ. And shortly after that is when I made a decision to ask Christ into my heart. It was like I wanted all in on this. Mm-hmm. And we were married, and a few years later had two wonderful daughters. And I taught Sunday school for over 20 years, served on church boards. We lived on Christian principles at our home and in our family business. But as I look back over all those years, I really didn't understand the power of prayer until 2007. So I'll just kind of tell you how that came about. Someone had asked me to go to a healing conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I just kind of wondered, why would I be going? I didn't really need any healing in my body, and I just really didn't know about all of that anyway. Mm-hmm. And yet I went. And I realize now why I was going, and it was that we were learning how we can all pray for healing. It was just kind of a new idea for me. They based it on the premise of Matthew 10:8. It says, "Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, and drive out demons. Freely you have received, and freely give." And it was almost like that verse just came alive to me, like it was my new job description. And they had us, practice these short little declarative prayers on the people around us, and we were seeing how God was working, and my excitement was just rising. My faith was rising. And I like to tell the story of how when I came out of there, and we hadn't even left the building, I saw a woman that was really walking, but she was dragging her one ankle. She wasn't able to actually walk on that foot. So I just went up to her. I said, I just found out Jesus still heals. Can I pray for your ankle? And she was like, well, I was in a car accident 6 years ago. They had to take out all the nerves in the front of my ankle, and they said I'll never be able to walk on my foot again or feel anything. I said, well, let's try it. So she was like, okay. So I'm praying for her, and she says, I can feel something. And I just remember standing up and looking at her saying, you do? I mean, I was as shocked as she was.
Mm-hmm.
And so we continued to pray, and by the time we were done, she was walking on that ankle. And I was just like, oh my goodness, God. I mean, it was like all the walls were blown off of who God is, what he can do. The lid was opened.
That's amazing.
And yeah. So when I came back to our business, we have a lot of different people that work here, and I was just so excited because I wanted everyone to be able to experience, what God could do for them. So we had a particular employee that was actually Muslim that was having a back problem and could hardly stand on her feet while she was trying to do her job. And so I asked her if I could pray for her and explained that I pray to Jesus, and she said, go ahead, and her back was healed. Jesus healed her back, and she was so excited that she ran up the stairs from my office and brought down another Muslim friend who had a back problem, and God did the same thing for them, and it was just so exciting to see what God could do. And I was the type that I would be driving down the street, I would see somebody that maybe was having some sort of a physical issue, and I'd park the car and jump out and say, hey, did you know Jesus still heals?
Did anybody think you were crazy at the time?
I'm sure they probably did. But it was like I really lost all fear of what man thought, because I just wanted the people to know what God could do for them. And I did. I mean, the Lord really taught me. He was very good about that, to have some discretion. I learned that not always is it what we see with our eyes and the physical that it needs healing, but many times it might be their heart, and whether that be, with old wounds or bitterness or anger, all of those things that need healing. And so I've tamed down a bit here. But as this was going on, it was just like 2 weeks later that I was going to go and visit my mom and dad in Florida. And as I'd mentioned earlier, my dad was Jewish, and he was, a great man of integrity and a successful businessman, giving and community minded, but he just didn't believe in Jesus as a savior. In fact, whenever I would talk to him about it, he would just say to me, you have me confused with someone who gives a darn. So it was, he always said, I know you mean well, but. And so as things had gone along, my father had a knee replacement surgery a couple years previous, and then he had a major stroke as a result of that. And one of the issues he had was with an eye that would not open and was weepy. And, he'd been to the doctor, and they said, there's just nothing we can do. This has to do with the stroke. So when I was going down to visit, of course, I was very excited. And so the first thing I'm saying is, can I pray for your eye? And my dad, knowing what happens when I get excited, said, just get it over with, because he knew I was going to be there for a few days and thought, okay, we'll let her do her thing.
That's funny.
So that's what happened. And I had just this short little prayer for his eye. But what happened is it just flung open. His eye flung open, and all he could say was, I can see, I can see. And I said, well, do you know who did that for you? And so we just visited about Jesus and all that he is doing and what he means to have him in our heart and all of that type of thing. Yet I didn't really go to that point of asking him if he wanted to ask Jesus in his heart that day. And I thought, well, we'll just kind of see how things go. And the next morning, Dad got up to come.
And how old was he at this time?
Okay, he was 89. Yeah, he was 87 when he had a knee replacement to play better tennis. So he was in very good shape. But all these things had made a turn in his life.
Yeah.
He was suffering from some hardships. And so this was a time that I believe that he was just open to what's happening here, what's going on. So the next morning when he came out, he said, I can't see a thing. And I'm like, oh my goodness, Jesus healed your eye. he says to me he did, and I realized I'd forgotten that he'd had short-term memory loss with his stroke, and so
Hmm.
he did not remember what had happened the day before. And I was like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do now? When I realized it didn't have a thing to do with me, it was all Jesus,
Hmm.
and that he had it all figured out. And so I just looked at him. He had worn glasses since he was a little boy. And so I just said, why don't you take off your glasses? Maybe he gave you 20/20 vision. And so he took off his glasses and he could see perfectly.
That's
And
amazing.
so, yeah, so at that time, I told him again about what had happened and asked him if he wanted Jesus in his life. And he did. After he asked him, and he said, I have never felt so good.
Hmm.
And yeah, then we took him to the doctor and they checked his eyes and he had 20/20 vision.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was just a beautiful thing. I asked the Lord to just burn that into his mind that he would never forget it, and he didn't. He lived another 2 years after that. And how God did that was so amazing to me because through all the years I had planned, how was this going to happen? How would my dad find Jesus? Whether it be at church plays or musicals or
Mhm.
friends or pastors, but I never, ever, ever thought about in a healing way because I didn't really even know about it. It wasn't
Mhm.
even a part of my life. Yet I hang on to this story because I'm thinking I prayed for 39 years for him. And
Wow.
I just, so I say to people, don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. And the other part of it too is that I just saw how God healed him when my dad didn't even have the faith that
Mhm.
this was going to work. It was get it over with. And yet God, in his loving kindness, he healed him. And
Mhm.
what a testimony that is. So, yeah, I
Mhm.
just praise God for it.
I love that. I love those stories. Have you continued to do healings like this with other people?
Yeah, well, God has, yes,
Yes,
He
you're
has.
the instrument, right?
We actually, with our business, had purchased a building next door that we were going to use for our business, and the Lord really had us turn it into a prayer center, direct line prayer center.
Wow.
And it is open. We have people coming in from people off the streets to bank presidents. We're seeing lots of different healings, restorations of marriages, jobs, all sorts of provision, things being done that way. And the funny part of how God works is this little tiny building, we get calls from all over the United States. We get emails from all over the world, and God is just using it in this powerful way. We're working in the behavioral hospital. We have teams that go into businesses and pray. So God has just opened the doors to be able to continue with this. So we have over 40 volunteers. So we see a lot of
Wow.
exciting things that God is doing.
I'll bet that's really rewarding to participate in something like that with people.
Yeah, there's nothing I love more than being used by God.
Hmm.
There's just nothing like it. And the thing that we see and we know is that when we're doing His work, He's busy blessing us.
Hmm.
So it's like no matter when you pray with somebody, you're always blessed back, just
Hmm.
seeing what God's doing and however He wants to be working. But yeah, it's an honor.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a calling.
I think that's right. And I think that sometimes it's just a matter of stepping into those
Hmm.
because my favorite phrase is I've become comfortable with being uncomfortable because God
Mm-hmm.
always stretches us and and the things that we have to do can be something you're nervous about doing or whatever, but
Hmm.
if you really walk into it and do what you're being called to do, you'll just be blessed beyond comprehension. Even I just think about here we are facilitating a prayer center, and before that I had never prayed out loud with anybody before besides my family.
Wow.
And
Hmm.
and so that was a really scary thing. And it kind of started with our employees, and
Hmm.
then as you see, it just continues from there. But there's always a new opportunity that comes that makes me a little bit anxious. But when I go into that and stretch myself, then he's preparing us for the next, which is more. So,
Hmm. Oh, I
yeah.
love that. Could people that listen to the podcast reach out? Do you have information that can they call in or email you for your prayer center?
Absolutely, yes, because we are getting, like I said, calls from all over and emails from all over the world. It's just people are needing the Lord and they're
Mhm.
just Googling for prayer and that's what they're finding. And so
Really?
Yes, and so we just are very happy to be
So
talking to
how,
anybody.
yeah, so how can people find you?
Well, they are welcome to email us. We are direct line SD, like South Dakota, gmail.com, or we do have a website where you can put in prayer requests, which would be www.directlinesd.org. We also have phones, so we have a toll-free number, 1-877-717-8054. We would love to be able to come alongside people and pray for them and just encourage them. I mean, people always, always, always leave knowing that they are loved by the Lord, and that's the most important thing.
I agree. I think that is a healing power for us,
It
is
is.
God's love. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I believe that that's so important in the scheme of all of life, that if a person knows how much they're loved by the Lord
Mm-hmm.
and can receive that love and the forgiveness that Jesus gives us, it's so foundational for everything that we are doing in life.
I agree. What have you found to help people be receptive to that? Because do you find that some people are closed and they're not sure how to let that love in?
And I think really just that, I call it a taste and see,
Uh-huh.
just by receiving prayer, just when we're praying for people, I just ask the Lord to let them feel how much He loves them.
Mm-hmm.
And they always do. And it's just when people encounter the Lord, it's like you start to let down those walls and open up to what He has for you, because He just loves them so much and has so much He wants to shower upon them, that I just think that's the key, is an experience with God. Yeah.
I love that. I totally agree. Thank you so much for sharing. Anything else you wanted to let us know or tell us?
I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I love what you are doing and getting that word out to us. Testimonies are so powerful, because testimony means do it again. When we share a testimony, it means if you're hearing it about somebody else, that God can do that for you.
Yeah.
And the power in that. I'm encouraged every day by hearing what's going on in somebody else's life.
Yes.
And that builds my faith, and it also helps me in situations, because we know as Christians there are trials, and we need each other, and that's a big thing, that we have each other, and just to have someone to come alongside you and be able to continue to encourage you and to speak that word of the Lord that's so powerful. Yeah.
So I teach human development at a university, and so I look a lot at brain science and psychology and those beliefs. And I think when we hear other people's testimonies of God in their lives, it almost opens up our belief system, which then allows us to receive God.
Right.
And I love how you said that, praying for others to have a taste. I love that, taste and see. I'm going to start using that. I love that.
Taste and see that the Lord is good. Wonderful. Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Susie, for sharing your
you.
story and what you're doing. I think your work is so powerful and needed right now. So thanks for all you're doing.
Like I said, it takes all of us to do it. We're all doing a part of it.
So. We are. We're all a part of that body of Christ.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Right. Well, thank you. All right. Well, I'm here with Jasmine. She's from Idaho, and she's going to share with us a story that took place with her mother's journey through cancer and the many miracles that they experienced and that she saw. So, Jasmine, thanks so much for being on the show, and let's hear your story.
So, I was at home with just my mom and dad. I was engaged at the time. My siblings are all a little bit older, so they were all moved out and gone already. And my dad had left town, and so I spent the night at my future mother-in-law's house on her couch because it was too far of a drive to go home late at night. And in the morning I had planned to go visit my sister. She was working at a store in town. And there's 2 freeways in Reno where I grew up. One of those freeways would take me to my sister, and the other freeway would take me home. And for some reason, I don't remember getting on the freeway. It was almost as if I blacked out or something. All of a sudden, I was on the road home. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not going to go see my sister today. I'll go home. So I went home, and my mom was getting some of the bedrooms together because I was going to get married in the next month. So we're planning for family to come stay with us. I was in the living room down the hallway from where my mom was, and I heard her moaning. So I ran down the hallway to see her, and she was on the floor and she couldn't answer me. And I did the only thing that I could think of. I knelt down and said a prayer. As soon as I said amen, she snapped out of it. She couldn't speak very well. Her words were very slurred. She thought she had had a stroke. So I got her up to her room, and we got her dressed in normal clothes, and we left to go to the hospital.
And at this point, did you know that anything was wrong with your mom?
We had no idea.
Okay, so this was your first encounter with a health issue with her.
Yes.
Okay.
So we went to the ER, and it was kind of weird because in the Reno ER, you could wait there for hours. And as soon as they saw my mom, they got her right back. And so I knew something had to be pretty wrong. So we called my dad and had him come because he was out of town just about an hour. So he came and met us at the hospital. They took her back for some testing, and this man entered the room and said, "It's brain cancer," and then he left the room.
Oh my goodness.
So at that point, they were keeping an eye on her. They admitted her into the ICU, and they said that she probably wouldn't be able to leave the hospital for my wedding. And she just kept counting down the days, saying, "I need to be out of here for my daughter's wedding in 18 days. And she just counted down. And it was the weekend before my wedding. And she said, "If I don't make it to your wedding, please don't come to visit me on your wedding day."
Oh.
And she said, "This day is about you, not me." And my mom's best friend is living in Oregon. And she has a family of her own of 4 kids. And she's a neuro nurse. And she just up and left her family to come take care of my family. And under her care, the doctor let my mom come out of the hospital to be cared for at home because my mom's friend, we call her Aunt Laura, but she was able to take care of my mom from home. So my mom was able to make it to our wedding that day.
Wow.
So fast forward a little bit of time later, she has brain surgery, and they were pretty confident that they did a good job. And they said if it were to come back, it would be 4 to 6 years. And so we think all is so great. And then I get pregnant shortly after. A couple months into my pregnancy, we decided that we were only going to make the trip from Rexburg to Reno once during my pregnancy because it's such a long drive.
How many hours is that?
10 hours.
Okay.
That's a lot for a pregnant lady.
Pregnant. Yes, it is.
Yes. And so we decided to go back, and my mom threw me a beautiful baby shower with my sisters and friends. And then we drove back up to Rexburg, and I think it was like a week or 2 later, I get a phone call from my mom, and she says, "The cancer's back, and this time I'm not getting treatment." And she hands the phone to my dad. And so he just explained to me that she wouldn't see September, and my baby was due on September 4th.
And what was going through your mind at that time when she said that?
That my mom would never see me as a mom. And so from that point on, we decided to travel down to Reno every month until August, because August I didn't feel like was a good month to travel since it was my last month of my pregnancy. And the last few weeks, I wasn't progressing, and I was getting really discouraged. And a week before I was due, we let my doctor know a little bit earlier, and he was willing to induce me a couple days early so that we could try to make it down there. So on September 1st, which happens to be my dad's birthday, we got induced and had our baby girl, Lily. We stayed at the hospital for 2 nights and at our home for 1 night. And when she was 4 days old, we drove the 10-hour trip to Reno.
Wow.
And when we got there, it was the sweetest thing to see my mom hold my daughter. It was a huge, huge blessing to be able to have that. And my mom, she could hardly stay awake, and she didn't have enough strength to hold her on her own, but all she kept doing was puckering her lips so that someone would move the baby close to her so she could kiss her.
Oh, sweet.
So we were able to have that for 2 days, and then my mom went into a coma and died the next week.
Wow.
So that is my miracle story.
That your mom was able to meet your new baby and hang on for that long. That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Have you felt your mom's presence? You know, you mentioned that you were sad that she wouldn't be able to see you be a mother. Have you felt her help at all in your mothering?
Actually, a lot. I've really had some amazing experiences with her. We work together to do family history work. She lets me know what I need to do. I've been able to hear her. One time at a baptism for my brother-in-law, I heard her singing when they were singing for his baptism.
Wow.
I see her at the temple sometimes, and she put her hand on mine at the temple once, and I felt her hand on mine. And I get to talk to her pretty often in the temple.
That is beautiful. I can imagine just how tender it was for your mom not to be able to be there with you. That's neat that she's still been able to be involved in your life and with you raising your children.
Well, we were really close then, but we're even closer now.
What a beautiful, touching story. Anything else that you learned or wanted to share with that story?
I learned the power of prayer. At that first moment that I didn't know anything what to do, when I knelt down and said a prayer, I felt the power of it. And then before my wedding, I kept hearing all of these people say they were praying for her in order for her to come to my wedding. I realized that I wasn't praying for that. And so when I realized that, I knelt down and said another prayer, and I felt hope that she would be able to be there.
What a beautiful story, Jasmine. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for having me on here to share.
All right, well, that's our show for today. Both really beautiful ladies. I appreciated both their perspectives, different circumstances. One healed and one felt the tenderness of the Lord through a really sad time, yet both gained a knowledge of the power of prayer in different ways, and that power can look different depending on the situation, depending on the needs of the individuals involved. And I would submit that both of them had their very own taste and see experience with the Lord's love, which is life-changing and miraculous. So, ladies, thanks for sharing those beautiful stories. Another quick shout out for spreading the word. Spread the word about Wonders and Miracles podcast. And thank you so much for doing that. Also, if you have a miracle story that you'd like to share, please submit it to my website at wondersandmiracles.com. And you can also listen to all my past episodes on my website. So go check that out. And I can't wait to hear how God has shown up in your life. Psalm chapter 38, verse 8. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him. I hope that you can think of a time when you have had a taste and see experience with the Lord and have felt his love personally change you. And as always, remember to notice and celebrate the miracles everywhere, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen.